Why Alexander Volkanovski will outsmart Diego Lopes.
The greatest featherweight of all time, Alexander Volkanovski.
Technically, he's the best.
Alex is a phenomenal fighter.
Volkanovski is still the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet.
I'm always going to improve. I'm always going to get better. You're always going to see a better version of myself.
Volkanovski is a tank. He is an absolute animal. Relentless, unbelievable drive, knockout power, ground and pound.
I think Lopes is in for a very, very hard fight. He's a gamer, he's a great dude, a very nice fella. I'm sure he's expecting to go out there and win the belt, but I'm sorry, mate, that ain't happening.
The dream is realized tonight for Diego Lopes.
Lopes is big for this division. Long and dangerous boxing. This dude is an absolute savage. He's so fun. He's so explosive. And he's got it rolling.
He's so dangerous, man. It's not just that he's good, he's fucking scary. He's intense.
Diego Lopes for the vacant UFC featherweight title.
After Ilia Topuria vacated the featherweight belt, Volkanovski vs Diego Lopes was made for the undisputed featherweight belt at UFC 314. And although a lot of people are very hyped on the prospect that Diego Lopes is, I'm here to tell you that Alexander Volkanovski will outsmart Lopes and will once again become the featherweight champion. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA. I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. When you talk about Alexander Volkanovski, a couple of things become very apparent to you. A, that this guy was one of, if not the featherweight GOAT, but also B, the type of skill set that this guy had was absolutely incredible. Because when you look at his resume and some of the guys that he was able to beat, it's an incredible list. He was able to beat Jose Aldo, Max Holloway 3 times, Brian Ortega, the Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, and more. Just an incredible resume that he was able to put together. He was able to beat some of the previous GOATs of the featherweight division in Jose Aldo and Max Holloway 3 separate times, while also being able to hold his position as the featherweight champ for a very long time. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, how has Alexander Volkanovski been able to be so successful thus far? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first and main factor is his overall skill. Because when you look at Volkanovski, it's very clear that this guy is a complete fighter. He's not just a striker, he's not just a grappler, he does a great job at mixing and matching everything together in a very effective manner. Because when you talk about Volkanovski's striking, it's a perfect pairing of technique and speed. On the feet, Volkanovski does a really nice job at staying very technical. He has a really nice jab, he has a really nice left or right straight, can switch stances at will, but really the biggest thing that jumps out to you about his boxing ability, at least, is the speed that he throws his shots with. Now, obviously, at this point, he is getting a little bit older going into this fight against Diego Lopes, and we'll see how his speed holds up, but for the most part, every single time that we've seen Volkanovski out there, the speed that he's able to throw his shots at is honestly incredible. When he fought Max Holloway the 3rd time, it seemed like he was double the speed of Max Holloway. And obviously, Max Holloway is not known as a guy who has slow punching speed. But outside of just his boxing ability, Volkanovski also does a tremendous job at throwing kicks. Now, for the most part, what he does well with his kicks is throwing those leg kicks, but he also has the ability to throw an occasional high kick as well. But when you talk about Volkanovski's overall striking game, it's pretty clear that this guy does a lot of things well. And although he doesn't have one-punch knockout power, and he doesn't have a tremendous amount of physicality, which is something that I talk about in a lot of my videos, he's still able to overcome that with his speed and the overall technical ability that he does possess. So obviously on the feet, Volkanovski is one of the more polished strikers in the entire UFC. Now, as I touched upon before, Volkanovski is not just a striker out there, he also has tremendous wrestling. Now, in terms of his offensive wrestling, he does have a pretty good ability to do so. We have seen it in a couple different fights, but for the most part, the best aspect of Volkanovski's wrestling game is his defensive wrestling and his scrambling ability. And we specifically saw that in his first fight versus Islam Makhachev, as he was able to stop a lot of the takedowns that Islam was going for, and even when he did get taken down on occasion, he was able to get back to his feet for the most part in a relatively short amount of time. It's pretty clear that Volkanovski has tremendous his wrestling. And I think a huge reason for why we don't see Volkanovski wrestle more in some of his other fights outside of the Makhachev fight is due to the fact that he's so talented and so skilled on the feet that he's usually having a lot of success there, that he doesn't even need to utilize his wrestling. But overall, when you look at Volkanovski's game in terms of his striking ability and in terms of his wrestling game, it's pretty clear that this guy is a very high IQ'd, well-rounded fighter. But the next question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Alexander Volkanovski is going to outsmart Diego Lopes? Well, in my opinion, I think it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is Diego Lopes' overall game. Because when you look at Diego Lopes' game, there's obviously a lot to like. He's very explosive early on in the fight. He can essentially finish anybody in the first round. He has a pretty good ability to strike. He has really good jiu-jitsu. There's definitely a lot to like about his game. But with all that being said, I don't think Diego Lopes is the most technical guy out there. I think he's able to get away with having crazy physicality for the most part. He's able to get a bunch of knockouts in the first round. He's able to get submissions in the first round due to his overall physicality that he does possess, but I don't think he's the most technical guy out there. And I think when you're going up against a guy in Volkanovski, you have to have the perfect combination of physicality while also being very technical. Because when you talk about Volkanovski, this guy has seen it all. Obviously, as I mentioned before in the video, he's very good and very technical on the feet, and that doesn't only go for offense, it also goes for defense as well. Volkanovski is just a very difficult guy to beat. And when you talk about a guy in Ilia Topuria who did beat Volkanovski last time, obviously he knocked him out pretty badly. The difference between Ilia Topuria and Diego Lopes is obviously they're both very physical. Obviously they both hit very hard. I'll make the argument that Ilia hits a little bit harder, but regardless, both Ilia and Lopes have enough power to knock out Volkanovski. But when you look back at that fight between Ilia and Volk, Ilia actually had to go through a lot of fire in order to land that big shot. Volk was doing a pretty nice job at landing his jabs, landing high kicks, while just trying to keep Ilia Topuria away. But of course, eventually Ilia was able to get on the inside. He was able to land that huge shot to knock out Volkanovski. But the reason for why Ilia was able to land it wasn't just because he hits hard. It was also because he was very technical and made a technical adjustment through his combination that he was throwing. But when you talk about a guy in Diego Lopes, I do think initially he may have some explosive shots that he's throwing Volkanovski's way, but for the most part, I do think Volk is going to be able to weather that storm, block out a lot of the shots that are coming his way, and I don't think Diego Lopes is going to be technical enough in order to land the perfect shot on Alexander Volkanovski. Now, the next reason for why I think Volkanovski is going to outclass Diego Lopes is due to Lopes's gas tank. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before, Lopes is very explosive in the first round, but as the rounds do progress, he starts to tire out, and we obviously have never seen him in a 5-round fight, but even in 3-round fights, once it gets to the second and especially the third round, we've seen Diego Lopes tire out a little bit in a couple of different occasions. So now when you're talking about him going into a potential 5-round fight and also considering he's going up against Alexander Volkanovski, I do think that is going to be a very big issue for him. I think as the fight does progress, Volk is going to do a better job than he normally even does at going to the body quite a bit. I think that's going to be a huge part of Volk's game, maybe jabs to the body, left or right straights to the body, possibly even body kicks as well. And I also think as the fight does progress in rounds 2, 3, 4, and especially 5, I think Volkanovski is going to put his foot on the gas a lot more than maybe we would have seen in some other fights that he could be in. So overall, if I had to give my prediction for this fight, I would go with Volkanovski via decision. But with that being said, I do still think there is some upside for Diego Lopes to get a knockout in the first round. But outside of that, I also still see Diego Lopes as a very good up-and-comer. I think he's going to make improvements as the years do progress. But at this point, at this current moment, I think we're going to be seeing Alexander Volkanovski be the champion of the featherweight division once again. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this matchup. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Volkanovski is going to once again become the featherweight champ, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.